They laughed at her from the very first day. Not because she failed, not because she made a mistake, but because, in their eyes, she didn't belong there. The commander didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The contempt was in the tone, in the glance, in the way he walked past her as if she were invisible. She didn't react, didn't defend herself, didn't explain who she was, because she wasn't there to prove anything. She was there to observe. While others trained to impress, she trained to evaluate. Every poorly given order, every careless laugh, every flawed decision made by someone who believed they were in control. The commander assumed she was just another misplaced recruit, someone easy to dismiss, until a detail he couldn't ignore caught his eye. A symbol, a mark only those who had served on the other side would recognize, and in that moment, everything changed. The laughter died. Posture broke, and the man who had underestimated her realized too late that he wasn't training someone beneath him. He was being evaluated by someone above him. From wherever you're watching, let us know in the comments. And if this story has earned you respect, click like so others can find it too. The sun hadn't fully risen over Naval Special Warfare Training Center when the new class assembled on the gravel, boots crunched in formation, breaths visible in the cold morning air. 53 candidates stood waiting, most of them men who'd spent months preparing for this moment. At the far end of the second row stood Recruit Sullivan, average height, lean build, hair pulled back tight. Nothing about her suggested she didn't belong, but nothing suggested she did either. She held her duffel like everyone else, eyes forward, jaw set. Commander Hale walked the line with the confidence of a man who'd done this 100 times. 22 years in, 3 deployments, a reputation for running the toughest selection course in the Navy. He stopped in front of Sullivan, looked her up and down once through and kept walking. No acknowledgement, no nod, just the faint suggestion of a smirk as he moved on. The other instructors noticed. One of them, a senior chief with arms like bridge cables, leaned toward Hale and muttered something low. Hale shrugged. The message was clear without words. She won't last. Sullivan didn't react. She didn't need to. She'd heard worse. The first week was designed to break people, not through cruelty but through relentless, unforgiving pressure. Long swims in frigid water, obstacle courses that punished hesitation, runs that turned legs to concrete. Every evolution measured, every failure recorded. Sullivan moved through it quietly. She wasn't the fastest, she wasn't the strongest, but she never quit, never complained, never drew attention to herself. Hale noticed her the way you notice something out of place. Not because she stood out, but because she didn't. In a group where everyone was trying to prove something, she seemed to be proving nothing at all. During a beach run on day 4, Sullivan stumbled. Her boot caught a rock half buried in the sand. She went down hard, shoulder first. The candidates behind her had to break stride to avoid trampling her. Hale was watching from the dunes. He shook his head, made a note on his clipboard. Sullivan got up, brushed the sand off, kept running. No drama, no limp, just forward motion. By the end of week 1, 8 candidates had dropped. Some quit during the cold water immersion, others during the timed runs. One simply walked off the course without a word, duffel over his shoulder, eyes hollow. Sullivan remained, quiet, unremarkable, easy to overlook. The instructors talked about her in their office after hours. Senior Chief Vargas leaned against the filing cabinet, coffee in hand. "She's got something," he said. Hale glanced up from his paperwork. "She's got stubbornness, that's all. Stubbornness gets you through day 1. She's on day 7. Give it time," Hale replied. "They all break eventually." But Vargas kept watching her. He'd been in the teams for 19 years, seen thousands of candidates. Something about Sullivan's movements, her composure, didn't match her file. He couldn't place it, but it was there. Week 2 brought water drills. Candidates were bound at the wrists and ankles, dropped into a 12-foot pool, and expected to surface. Panic was the enemy. Control was survival. Sullivan went under without hesitation. 20 seconds passed. 30. 45. One of the instructors leaned over the edge, ready to pull her. She surfaced at 52 seconds, calm, breathing, steady. Water streamed from her face as she treaded water, bound limbs moving in small, efficient circles. Hale was standing at the far end of the pool deck, arms crossed. He watched her climb out, water streaming from her fatigues. She didn't look at him, didn't look at anyone, just moved to the back of the line and waited her turn again. Again, Hale called out. Sullivan nodded, stepped forward, went under a second time. This time she stayed down for 61 seconds. When she surfaced, Hale was closer, standing at the pool's edge. He studied her face for any sign of distress. Found nothing. You trying to prove something, Sullivan? No, sir. Then why push it? You said again, sir. Hale's jaw tightened. He waved her off. She climbed out and returned to formation. That night, in the barracks, the other candidates talked. Some wondered aloud how she'd made it this far. Others said she had something to prove. A few respected her silence. Sullivan sat on her bunk, lacing her boots for the next morning. She didn't join the conversation. Didn't need to. On her left forearm, barely visible beneath the rolled cuff of her sleeve, was a small tattoo. A trident. Not the standard Navy SEAL trident. This one was different. The points sharper. The anchor twisted. A variation so subtle that only a handful of people alive would recognize it. Sullivan pulled her sleeve down and went to sleep. Week 3 began with a navigation exercise. Teams of 4 dropped 15 miles inland with a map, compass, and 8 hours to reach the extraction point. No radios, no GPS, just terrain and judgment. Hale assigned Sullivan to a team with 3 men who'd been vocal about their doubts. He didn't say it out loud, but the message was there. Let's see how she handles this. The team moved out at dawn. Sullivan took the map without asking, studied it for 30 seconds, then handed it to the team leader. Your call, she said. The team leader, a former Marine named Ruiz, looked at her like she'd just refused to carry her weight. You're Nav, he said. Sullivan shook her head. You're team leader. You navigate. Ruiz stared at her, jaw tight. But he took the map. 3 hours in, they were lost. Ruiz had led them into a canyon that didn't match the terrain. The sun was climbing. Water was running low. Tension crept into every step. Sullivan walked at the rear, silent. She watched Ruiz check the map again, watched him try to match landmarks to the paper, watched the frustration build in his shoulders. The other 2 team members were getting vocal. One of them, a tall kid from Montana named Pierce, kept looking back at Sullivan. You know where we are? Pierce asked. Sullivan kept walking. Ask your team leader. I'm asking you, and I'm telling you to trust your chain of command. Pierce cursed under his breath but said nothing more. Ruiz stopped for the 4th time in 20 minutes. He was sweating now, and it wasn't just from the heat. He turned to Sullivan, pride and desperation fighting in his expression. You got something? Sullivan looked at the ridgeline above them, then back at Ruiz. We're 2 kilometers south of where we should be. How do you know? She pointed to a rock formation barely visible through the trees. That's marker 7. It's on the map. We passed marker 5 40 minutes ago, but didn't recognize it. Ruiz checked the map, tracing the route with his finger. His face changed. She was right. Why didn't you say something earlier? You didn't ask. Ruiz's face reddened, but he didn't argue. He adjusted course. The team moved faster now, tension easing as the landmarks started matching the map. They made the extraction point with 11 minutes to spare. Hale was waiting at the site, stopwatch in hand. He looked at Sullivan as she approached, noted her calm expression, the way she stayed behind the others. Good work, Ruiz, Hale said. Ruiz hesitated, glanced back at Sullivan, then forward again. Sir, Sullivan had the nav. Hale glanced at her. Sullivan said nothing. That right? Hale asked. Team effort, sir, Sullivan replied. Hale held her gaze for a moment. Something flickered in his expression, too quick to read. Then he dismissed them. But he was starting to notice things. Small things. The way she moved through evolutions without wasted motion. The way instructors who'd served in the teams watched her a little longer than the others. The way she never, not once, looked rattled. It bothered him. Not because she was failing. Because she wasn't. During a classroom session on tactical decision-making, Hale posed a scenario. Hostage situation. Limited intel. 2 possible entry points. He called on candidates at random, asking for their approach. When he got to Sullivan, he didn't use her name, just pointed. You, what's your call? Sullivan looked at the diagram projected on the wall, studied it for 3 seconds. Neither entry point. Hale's eyebrow lifted. Explain. The windows show interior light. Hostiles know we're coming. Both entries are expected. I'd wait. Wait, Hale repeated, voice flat. For the shift change, they'll move the hostage. That's when you have a window. Hale stared at her. The room went quiet. Other candidates shifted in their seats, waiting to see how this played out. Some looked skeptical, others curious. Cute theory, Hale said. And in the real world, people die while you're waiting. Sullivan didn't argue. She just nodded once and looked back down at her notes. Hale moved on to the next candidate, but something about her answer stuck with him. Not because it was wrong, because it wasn't. It was exactly what he would have done, exactly what he had done, on an operation in Yemen 4 years ago. The same scenario, the same choice, and it had saved 3 lives. He glanced back at Sullivan. She was writing something in her notebook. Calm, unaffected. Who the hell is this woman, he thought. Week 4 brought live fire exercises, close quarters combat drills. Candidates moved through shoot houses, clearing rooms under pressure, instructors watching every angle. The smell of gunpowder hung in the air. Ejected brass clinked against concrete floors. Commands were shouted. Movements were timed. Sullivan's turn came late in the day. She entered the first room, weapon up, movements efficient, no hesitation, no theatrics. She cleared 3 rooms in 41 seconds, every shot center mass, every corner checked, every transition smooth. The range instructor, a former SEAL named McKenna, watched from the observation deck. He'd been quiet all day, but when Sullivan finished, he leaned toward Hale. Run that footage back. Hale pulled up the recording. They watched it together in silence. Oh, see that? McKenna pointed to the screen. Her footwork, the way she cuts the pie on that corner, that's not basic training. Hale rewound, watched again. McKenna was right. The way she moved wasn't learned in a classroom. It was ingrained, automatic, the kind of muscle memory that took years to develop. Hundreds of repetitions, real situations. Check her file, McKenna said. I already did. No prior service. McKenna frowned. Then she's lying, or someone screwed up the paperwork. Hale said nothing, but he made a note. That night, he sat in his office, Sullivan's file open on his desk. He went through it, line by line. Nothing stood out. Everything clean, too clean. Birth date, education, physical scores, psych evaluation, all standard, all unremarkable. No red flags, no inconsistencies. But the footage didn't lie. He pulled up the shoot house recording again, watched her hands, her stance, the way she checked corners, the economy of movement that only came from repetition, from live situations, from experience that shouldn't exist in a recruit with no prior service. And then he saw it. A brief moment, less than a second, when her sleeve rode up during a reload, the tattoo on her forearm. He paused the footage, zoomed in, the trident, not the one they gave you when you graduated Bud S. The one they gave you when you made it through something else entirely. A program so classified most people didn't know it existed. A program that didn't officially appear in service records. The design was unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. The twisted anchor, the sharper points, the slight variation that marked operators who'd gone through advanced selection. The kind of selection that came after the teams. After years of proven performance in situations most people would never hear about. Hale's stomach dropped. He stared at the screen, at the ink that shouldn't be on a recruit's arm, at the symbol that represented a level of experience that made his own credentials look ordinary. He picked up his phone, scrolled through contacts, found a number he hadn't called in 3 years, a direct line to a friend who worked in personnel at Warcom, someone who had access to the files that didn't officially exist. He dialed. A voice answered on the 3rd ring. Rough, tired. Hale, it's late. I need you to run a name for me, off the record. A pause, the sound of a chair creaking. Go ahead. Recruit Sullivan. First name's in the file, but I need to know if she's... Stop. The voice on the other end went quiet. Then, carefully, you've got her there? Yeah. Why? She's not a recruit, Hale. She's an evaluator. Hale felt the air leave his lungs. What? Lieutenant Commander Sullivan, SEAL Team Evaluation Unit. She's there to assess your program, leadership, training standards, treatment of candidates, how you handle pressure, how you handle people who don't fit your assumptions. The words hit like a hammer. Hale closed his eyes. How long? Since day one. And no one told me. That's the point. If you know you're being evaluated, you change your behavior. They needed to see how you actually run things, how you actually treat people when you think no one's watching who matters. Hale felt his chest tighten. His mouth went dry. What's her background? You don't have clearance for that, but I'll tell you this much. She's got more time in the field than you do. 2 combat deployments you'll never read about. Credentials that would make most of your instructors look like weekend warriors. She's been in situations that never made it into official reports, and she volunteered for this assignment because the Navy needed someone who could blend in, someone who could take the disrespect and still maintain objectivity, someone who wouldn't break cover no matter how badly she was treated. The line went quiet for a moment. Then, how'd you treat her, Hale? Hale didn't answer. Couldn't. His mind was racing through every interaction, every dismissive comment, every assumption, every moment he'd underestimated her because she didn't announce herself the way he expected. Yeah, the voice said quietly. That's what I thought. She'll file her report through proper channels. You'll get your feedback. And Hale, whatever she writes, you earned it. Every word. The line went dead. Hale sat in the dark office, phone still in his hand. The silence pressed against him. He replayed every moment since day one. The smirk when he'd walked past her in formation, the assumption that she wouldn't last, the comment to Vargas, the way he'd assigned her to Ruiz's team, hoping she'd struggle, the tone in his voice during the hostage scenario, the doubt, the dismissal, the casual disregard. She'd absorbed all of it, noted all of it, cataloged every failure of leadership, every moment of bias, every time he'd let assumption override observation. And she'd done it without a word, without breaking character, without giving him any indication that she was anything other than what she appeared to be. That was the job. That was the test. And he'd failed it. Completely. Hale stood, walked to the window, looked out at the dark compound. Somewhere out there, Sullivan was in her bunk, probably writing her observations, recording his mistakes in precise, professional language that would be read by people whose opinions mattered, people who would judge him based on how he'd treated someone he thought was beneath his notice. He'd spent 22 years in the Navy, prided himself on his judgment, his fairness, his ability to see potential in people others overlooked, and he'd been wrong. Not about her ability, she'd proven that a dozen times over, but about his own. He'd let assumptions cloud his vision, let bias dictate his behavior, treated someone with more experience and more credibility than him like a liability because she was quiet, because she didn't fit his mental image of what a warrior looked like, because she was a woman in a space he'd unconsciously decided belonged to men. The weight of it settled on him like stone. The next morning, Hale called Sullivan into his office before formation. She entered exactly on time, stood at attention, expression unreadable, the same calm she'd maintained for 4 weeks. Hale didn't sit, didn't make her wait. He looked at her forearm, at the ink barely visible beneath her sleeve. I know who you are, he said quietly. Sullivan didn't react. Her expression didn't change. Yes, sir. How long were you planning to let this go? As long as it took, sir. Until I had a complete assessment. Hale exhaled slowly. His jaw was tight. I owe you an apology. No, sir. You owe your candidates better judgment. The words were simple, direct, without anger or satisfaction, just truth. And they cut deeper than any reprimand could have. Hale nodded. You're right. I observed 17 instances where unconscious bias affected evaluation criteria, 12 instances where competence was overlooked because it didn't present the way you expected. 4 instances where candidates were dismissed before they had a chance to prove themselves. Your standards are high, but your lens is narrow. Her voice was calm, professional, no vindication in it. Just facts delivered with the precision of someone who'd spent weeks watching, analyzing, documenting. Anything else in your report I should know about? Hale asked. Sullivan met his eyes. You'll receive the full assessment through proper channels, sir. But I'll tell you this. You run a good program. Your technical training is solid. Your instructors know their craft. Your standards are appropriate. But you're losing people who could make it because you decide too early who's worth your attention. And that decision is based on factors that have nothing to do with capability. Hale felt the sting of truth. Understood. Permission to speak freely, sir. Granted. The candidates you assume will fail. Some of them are the ones who'll save lives when it matters, because they don't need to be the loudest or the fastest or the most obvious. They just need to be right. And that takes a different kind of observation. It takes setting aside what you think you know and actually watching what's in front of you. She paused. You're good at your job, Commander. But you could be better. And the people who come through here deserve that. Hale stood silent for a moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he straightened his posture and raised his hand in a crisp salute. Sullivan returned it without hesitation. 2 professionals. No audience. No performance. Just respect earned through competence and acknowledged in silence. When she turned to leave, Hale spoke again. For what it's worth, Commander, you would have made it through, even if you were actually a recruit. Sullivan paused at the door. Didn't turn around. I already did, sir. 6 years ago. Finished first in my class. She walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Hale stood alone in his office, the weight of his assumptions settling on his shoulders like a rucksack loaded with stones. He thought about all the candidates he'd overlooked over the years. The quiet ones. The ones who didn't fit his mental image. The ones who worked hard but didn't make noise about it. How many had he lost because of his blind spots? How many had walked away thinking they weren't good enough when the truth was that he simply hadn't seen them clearly? The question sat heavy in his chest. The next day, Sullivan was gone. No ceremony, no announcement, no formation where her real identity was revealed. Just an empty bunk and a training class that moved forward without her. But the instructors noticed something. The way Hale watched the remaining candidates changed. He looked longer, asked more questions, stopped making assumptions based on first impressions, stopped deciding who would fail before they'd been given a real chance to succeed. During a pool evolution 3 days later, a smaller candidate struggled. Hale watched him surface, gasping, fighting to stay afloat with bound limbs, panic in his eyes. The old Hale would have written him off immediately, assumed weakness, made a note, moved on. Instead, he called the candidate over after the drill. You're fighting the water, Hale said. His voice was different, patient, small movements. Use your core, control your breathing. Try again. The candidate looked surprised, nodded, went back in. This time, he lasted 43 seconds. Not great, but better. Progress. Hale made a note. Not to drop him, to watch him, to give him time, to see what he could become with proper guidance instead of premature judgment. Word spread quietly among the staff. The recruit who'd never quit. The one who'd been there the whole time, watching them as much as they watched her. Senior Chief Vargas cornered Hale in the hallway one afternoon. His expression was uncertain. It's true, isn't it? She was evaluating us. Hale nodded. How'd we do? We have work to do. Vargas absorbed that, looked down at his boots. She was good, really good. I knew something was off about her, but I couldn't place it. The way she moved, the way she stayed calm. I should have seen it. We both should have, Hale said quietly. She was exactly what we're supposed to be producing, and we almost missed it completely because we weren't looking for it in the right place. 3 weeks later, Hale received a sealed envelope, official Navy letterhead. Inside was Lieutenant Commander Sullivan's evaluation report, 17 pages, single-spaced, comprehensive. She detailed every observation, every moment where bias had influenced decision-making, every opportunity to recognize competence that had been missed, every time assumption had overridden evidence. but she also noted the program's strengths: the rigor, the standards, the quality of technical instruction, the commitment of the staff, the genuine desire to produce capable operators. Her recommendations were precise, clinical, actionable. Adjust evaluation criteria to account for different leadership styles and presentation methods. Implement blind assessments for certain evolutions to remove bias. Train instructors to recognize and counter unconscious assumptions. Create mechanisms for candidates to demonstrate competence outside traditional metrics. Establish regular program reviews by external evaluators. Nothing punitive, nothing personal. Just a clear roadmap for improvement written by someone who understood both the mission and the failures. At the end of the report, a single note written in different formatting. Commander Hale runs a demanding program with high standards and a genuine commitment to excellence. With adjustments to evaluation methodology and continued attention to unconscious bias, it has the potential to identify and develop the full spectrum of warriors the Navy needs. Recommend implementation of suggested changes and follow-up assessment in 12 months. The program's technical foundation is strong. Its human foundation requires attention. Hale read the report twice, then filed it carefully in his desk, not to hide it, to keep it close. The changes started small. Evaluation forms updated to include new criteria. Instructor training sessions added to the schedule. Discussions about bias and assumption. Role-playing exercises. Reviews of candidate footage with the explicit goal of identifying overlooked competence. A quiet recalibration of how potential was measured and recognized. 6 months later, a candidate who would have been dropped in week 2 under the old system made it through to graduation. Quiet, steady, unremarkable in all the ways that used to matter. Easy to overlook if you weren't paying attention. Until the final live fire exercise, where his tactical decisions and calm under pressure earned him the highest marks in his class. His ability to read situations and make correct calls without fanfare marked him as someone who would be an asset in the field. Hale watched him receive his trident during the graduation ceremony, thought about Sullivan, about the lesson she'd taught without ever raising her voice or breaking her cover, about the cost of assumption and the value of actually seeing what was in front of you. A year after Sullivan's evaluation, Hale received another envelope, new orders. He was being transferred to the instructor development program. His new assignment: train the next generation of course leaders on how to identify potential in all its forms, how to recognize competence that didn't announce itself, how to see past bias and assumption to the capability that mattered. The orders were signed by a captain he'd never heard of, but attached was a handwritten note on official letterhead. The handwriting was precise, controlled, familiar. Your willingness to learn from difficult feedback and implement meaningful change demonstrates the kind of leadership the teams need at every level. Well done. The program is better because you made it better. LCDR Sullivan. Hale kept that note in his desk drawer. Not hidden, just present. A reminder. Not of failure, but of the moment he'd been given a chance to see his blind spots and chosen to do something about them. The moment he'd stopped defending his assumptions and started questioning them. That was the real test. Not whether he could run candidates through evolutions, but whether he could run himself through the harder evolution of examining his own judgment and finding it wanting, and whether he could do the work to fix it. Sullivan had given him that chance. Not with mercy, not with gentleness, but with the clear-eyed assessment of a professional who understood that real leadership meant being willing to be evaluated and to change based on what that evaluation revealed. The truth is simple. Real strength doesn't demand recognition. It earns it, not through noise or performance or the need to be seen, but through work so consistent and so undeniable that silence becomes its own statement. The professionals who matter most don't need to prove anything to anyone except themselves. They show up, they do the work, they maintain their standards even when no one's watching, especially when no one's watching. And when the world finally catches up, when the recognition comes, they don't celebrate or gloat or demand apologies. They just nod, because they already knew. They've always known. The only question was whether anyone else would notice. And in the end, the right people always do. Not because the truth announced itself with fanfare or drama, but because the truth was there all along, waiting patiently for eyes sharp enough and humble enough to see it clearly.